Hello, I'm Michael Kurland, CEO and co-founder of Branded Group, an award-winning facility maintenance and construction management company that services multi-site commercial properties such as retail, restaurants, healthcare facilities, and educational institutions. Welcome to the Be Better podcast. Each week, I interview thought leaders from a variety of industries who will share their stories and the lessons they learn as they strive to be better for their clients, partners, employees, and their community. Are you ready to be better?
Thanks everyone for joining us today on the Be Better podcast. Today my guest is Javier Lozano Jr. He is the National Director of Business Development for CMI Mechanical. Javier, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Yeah, it's good to see you, buddy. Last time we saw each other, we were in person in a time where we could actually shake hands and not be looked at sideways for doing something like that. And I look forward to the day that we can do that again.
Yeah, I agree. I've been good. It's been kind of crazy, but I agree. It's been weird, going from when we first met, in Denver at the Gaylord Event Center, and things were just normal. I mean, it was not normal, but it was still kind of normal. And then now we're here, and I mean, this is kind of, I don't want to keep overusing the new phrase, but it's the new normal. But it's what you got to do. And we're doing great over here on our end in Denver. Things are fine. I can't complain. Things could always be worse in other situations,
Absolutely. I think you bring up a good point. I mean, it is we don't know exactly what the new normal is going to be, but our new normal now. We like to start off the show with a little softball here. What do you do and why do you do it?
Okay. So as you kind of introduced me, I'm the National Director of Business Development. So a lot of times some people think so you basically just develop business. Well, I would say I do a little more than just that. I basically handle our sales and marketing strategy for CMI Mechanical on the national scale, as well as some of it on the local scale as well too. I have a passion about sales and marketing. I truly enjoy it. I think the reason why I have such a big passion for it is I started a business 2008 at the height of the recession and had my back against the wall. I had no choice. I signed a 5-year lease. And this is right before the recession actually hit. Signed a 5-year lease, personal guarantee, nothing but me to make this thing work. So it was either you fold or you got really good at sales and marketing. And then as things kind of evolved and I kind of started refining my craft, if you will, I decided that, I've got to start getting some better systems in place and started getting really good at it. And eventually my passion started growing more towards the sales and marketing side versus what I was doing, at the time was running a martial arts and personal training studio. And so I eventually just kind of started seeing that was more of what I wanted to do. And this is kind of, where I'm at right now with CMI Mechanical, where I get to handle that aspect of it is kind of creating the strategies and deploying some of the strategies that we're working on as well too.
Yeah, I mean, you're a very interesting guy, Javier. You started off when we met. You told me you opened your own martial arts business, at the height of the recession, like you said, and you were able to come through that with flying colors. Transition into now, national director. You're doing business development for an HVAC company. You do a great job with, and you do it all yourself too. Like I need Paul to do all this stuff for me, and you're just a freelance and doing it yourself. And then you also, I was, checking out your LinkedIn page before. It says you're a #1 best-selling author. Yeah. So I'm kind of curious about that. Talk to me about that. Where does this little humble part of I'm a #1 best-selling author, but I don't want to ever talk about this come from?
Yeah. So basically, a couple of years ago, I hired a business coach. I've hired business coaches throughout my career, just because that's how you get to. I want to say that's how you grow in your not just accountability, but you grow in your knowledge. And so I hired a business coach, and he had some other clients and whatnot. And so basically, what we did is we all decided to put together a book. It's called Influence and Income Online. And essentially his name is James Smiley, and he got other of his clients and other influencers that's all contributed into this book. And I wrote a section on the topic. It was actually about podcasting, believe it or not. And basically, I decided to kind of take that, to the next level, and we kind of started helping promote it. And so 27 other entrepreneurs promoted to their network of influence as well too. And essentially, the way it works is when you write a book and it reaches #1 status on Amazon, then you're a best-selling author. And I didn't realize that's what it was. I'm not going to say it was easy, because you have to have good topics, good content, good information. But then you also have to have the network to actually get it out there as well too. So, unfortunately, I'm not a New York's best-selling author, but I'll take this as a stepping stone for right now. But this happened last year. We wrote the book in like 2018. And then we started kind of like getting everything finalized. And then in 2019, we started kind of pushing it, and we were all just, going nuts on it as far as getting traffic to it. And eventually it became a number one book. And that's kind of how it ended up.
Interesting. I did not know that. And I'm going to now have to add to your #1 status and go purchase me a copy on Amazon. So I'm looking forward to, especially the podcasting part, that's something right up my alley.
Yeah, exactly. So there's other things in there, but there's everyone writes a topic about what they wanted to do, and that was kind of something I was like, I'm going to try this one. I'm going to do the podcasting part, and so there's a lot of good information in that book. So it's really cool.
And what really got you? You seem like a Renaissance man: author, podcasting, sales, martial arts. So what got you into the podcast, and what made you excited about that?
I really enjoy speaking in front of a crowd. So, whenever you're teaching martial arts and you're doing personal training and you're doing group training, like you have to talk to an audience, and at times my audience would be as large as 200 people. And so I just enjoy communicating and sharing stories and talking about things that just kind of are a way of expressing yourself in a sense. And what I started realizing more and more as going live on Facebook and now you can do it on LinkedIn and all this, that we all, to a degree, all need to have a platform that we can actually go out and speak and gain a certain level of not just influence, but a certain level of credibility, a certain level of, I'm not going to say knowledge, but just authority is probably the best way of doing it. I gained a big chunk of my authority by running a business, by speaking in front of people, by speaking in front of businesses and coaching other people on how to improve. And started thinking, this whole podcasting thing, I can totally speak into this because this is my platform. This is what I enjoy doing. I love speaking to, about topics that really engage me, like what we're doing right now with the Be Better podcast. And podcasting just kind of came natural to me. So now it's just one of those things that it wasn't really kind of an awkward, you sit there and you talk in front of a camera, you don't know what to say, or a mic or whatever. It's more of like, okay, map out my conversations, what I'm going to talk about, my topics, and then we start going nuts on it. And that's kind of how I kind of worked on it in the beginning. And eventually it just kind of started, the podcast that we run right now, it kind of just grew and morphed into its own self. I had a vision for what it was, and then it's something different. But I enjoy the platform to go out and speak on this.
That's kind of crazy, how things just morph into what they're supposed to be, right?
Yes.
They find their own way, even if it's not what you expected.
Yeah, and I think it takes some time to figure that part out, because we all have a vision of what we want. But then once you let your podcast kind of have certain types of guests on there, then the podcast starts shaping itself. And that's kind of what I learned about running my podcast, with Facility and Property Management Secrets Radio is that I had a vision of what I thought it would do. And it's gotten us some business, but it's completely just transformed itself to something different. And it's exciting. I can't complain,
Yeah, you do a great job. And how many episodes are you into the podcast as of now?
So the way we do our episodes is because we do our interviews, they're roughly 45 minutes long, give or take. And so like ours is probably going to be, you and I here is like 25 minutes. And what I've realized is that some people can handle about a 20 to 25 minute podcast. So I split them into two parts every episode. And so if you think about it, we're at 24 and I've got 4 more interviews that I got to edit and publish. So, really, we probably interviewed 12 dozen people or so. And then we've got a few other ones that we're kind of getting lined up. But that's kind of how we handle it, is we put them in a 2-part series and we just kind of go from that point.
Great. Well, you've done all these different things in such a short career, because you're definitely a young guy. I want to know, what are you curious about right now? Where's your focus? What's next?
That's a good question, man. So I guess to kind of paint the backstory a little bit is, I ran a business for 10 plus years, and I achieved everything I ever wanted to achieve by doing that. I thought I was going to be running my business for forever, until I was like 60 years old or whatever. To the point, I don't tell this to a lot of people, but I got the business name tattooed on my back, on my back. And
oh, wow, that's commitment right there.
I don't tell a lot of people about that, but it's in Japanese. And the funny part about it is, like, so people ask, like, oh, what is that? I was like, it's just, Japanese, calligraphy. And then once people ask more details, I'm like, this is what it is, and this is what it means. It's actually the name of my company. They're like, you tattooed your company on your back. I'm like, I was committed. So I was literally, yeah, clearly. I was this is what I'm going to do. And 10 years later, things kind of shaped into something different. I achieved everything I wanted to do in the business. And I'm not saying I couldn't have done more, but I just saw that there was not enough for me to want to continue that. Plus I had a family, young kids, wife, and it was just, I wasn't putting the time that my family needed. I was being an absentee father, not by choice, but by circumstances, and so I decided to sell. And it took me a while to kind of figure out where I wanted to kind of take my next career jump, if you will, because being self-employed for over 10 years, your thought process is completely different. You're used to making all the decisions. So, it took a little time to kind of figure out where I wanted to take things. And when I kind of decided, I'm going to go back into the workforce, I'm going to start kind of exploring this and see where I can go. I mean, this opportunity with CMI Mechanical was great because it allowed me to take my entrepreneurial spirit, my creativity, this is what I want to kind of do, and driving factor, and apply that. Where I'm at now in my career, I want to take this thing to the next level. I mean, I do believe that I've got the qualities and the skill sets to be an executive, C-suite executive, that sort of stuff. And when is that going to happen? I have no clue. My goal is essentially is to use every opportunity I have and just grow it as big as possible. So with CMI Mechanical, my goal really is to bring in as much business as possible, but bring in business accounts that are like, we never had a shop before. And all of a sudden, I'm here bringing these opportunities that are like, wow, we're actually in the fight for this type of account. We can actually win this, and take those things in there. But I'd love to see myself into some sort of higher level, bigger decision-making, where there's a lot of pressure being kind of put on me, if you will.
Yeah. To your point, what you said earlier made me think, you called all the shots and then you want to go back to the workforce. I was the total reverse. I was in the workforce, as a director of business development for my previous company. And once that tenure ended, I was like, I don't know how I'm ever going to listen to anybody else ever again. So at least now, if I'm pissed off at my boss, it's me. And so
exactly,
I can be mad at myself. But yeah, that's great. So CEO or something like that, that's what you're looking forward to get to next, or?
Yeah, I never thought I would say that, but then again, I never thought I'd sell my business either, right? So
right, clearly.
But I'm not going to put CEO on my back or anything like that.
So I'm gonna advise against no more tattoos of job descriptions on your back, please.
Yeah, no, but it's funny. It's something that it's kind of started to cross my mind. I'm actually reading a book as we speak, an audio book. It's called the CEO Next Door. I'm not sure if you've heard of it.
I haven't. Tell me about it.
It's a great book. I do a lot of audiobooks. That's kind of all I do. I've been reading other actual paperback books, but that's one I do. I just read it when I go to work. And essentially it just talks about how a lot of us, think that a CEO is going to be someone of like these big Fortune 500 companies. And we have to take into account that there's a lot of actual small companies and the small to medium sized businesses that are anywhere from 5 million, 20 million, 100 million, et cetera. That also need CEOs and have board of directors and all this other stuff. And they're talking about that there's opportunities in these areas, and your odds are much, much better of becoming a CEO in these roles in these companies. And how they kind of paint the picture is that they say your first 8 years of your career, it should be X. And then your next, 6 to 10 years should be doing Y. And then once you hit your late 40s to early 50s, this is where you start implementing what you've worked on the past 15 plus years. And you start trying to get into these C-suite and type roles or into boards and whatever. And then you can start working towards becoming that CEO. And it kind of maps everything out. They have this entire statistics behind it, where they're literally taking, they coach people to become CEOs and also coach people as they actually achieve that. And they're taking surveys and they're taking information, they're collecting data, and they have all this data they're spitting out saying this is what our data has actually showed. And it's really, it's kind of amazing. So after reading that book, I have not done yet, but as I've been reading it, I was like, this might be something that I want to entertain. And it's kind of crossed my mind. And so I'm not going to discount it, but it's something that I'm kind of curious about.
Well, I think, from my experience, I am what you just described, the CEO for the smaller company. And I mean, I'm self-appointed, so that's probably the only way I was going to get to be a CEO, at least before my 50s. But I think you'd make a great CEO. I think you got all the chops to do it. So, I hope that, in 10 years, we're still doing our podcast and we're still coming on each other's shows. And at some point you're CEO of CMI or some other company that would be happy to have you.
Yeah, no, it'd be great. It'd be exciting.
So what motivates you to be better? Because it seems like, we talked about these career paths and how, you definitely have a little strange, weaving career path, which is really cool, but you've succeeded at everything you've done. So what motivates you to be better and get to these levels to be able to jump to a new place and then start over and then become successful doing that as well? Why do you keep changing and the motivation to keep going?
Yeah, and that's a great question. I'm very competitive, so I don't share this very often as well either. But I'm also a former world champion athlete. I used to compete professionally in sport karate and won a world title in 2001. And I basically,
And just keep finding out all these great nuggets about you here.
And that wasn't an easy task by any means. There was a lot of pain and suffering before all of that. I remember back in, when I was teaching classes to my students, they would see my trophies and they're like, you must have won all the time. I'm like, do you see the trophies for 5th place and 8th place? They're like, no, where are those? They don't give them out. They're like, what do you mean? I'm like, you're only seeing my successes. You didn't see all my failures.
Right.
And so, I'm very competitive. I don't like to lose. I don't enjoy coming in second place. I mean, it goes to the extreme of Talladega Nights where Ricky Bobby's dad is like, if you're not first, you're last, and I'm not telling that to, saying that my kids have to act like that. That's a personal thing for me. But sure. I can't do things for fun. It has to be competitive. If there's something that I'm good at doing, I have to win. So at sports martial arts, I had to win. It was the only option. Getting second place wasn't something you had a good match. I'm like, no, that wasn't the plan.
Right.
People would say why don't you just go back and compete for fun? I'm like, no, that's like telling Tiger Woods just to go enter a tournament just for fun. He's not going to do that.
Right.
And so that's kind of where my mentality is of this whole be better thing is that I have to win. I have to be the best at everything I do. There's things that I know I suck at and I'm okay not trying to be the best at it, but if there's things I'm like, what, I'm actually kind of decent at this, then I want to find every way possible to leverage my opportunity, whether it's education, whether it's, networking and interacting with actually top level people, whatever it is, I'm trying to do that. Examples that I'm doing that with is I do audiobooks, right? So on average, I'll read 1, maybe 2 audiobooks a week, depending on my drives. So if I'm driving for a half hour, I'm listening to an audiobook. Since October-ish, because I take breaks and stuff like that, but since last year, 2019, October to now, I've probably read 15 plus audiobooks.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And and then I'll go into where I just don't do anything for 6 weeks and my mind is overloaded. And then I'll go back to going nuts again. So I don't know, like I've been reading a ton of books, and I'm just educating myself on improving my marketing, improving my sales, improving my leadership skills, improving like all these things. And I'm like, okay, I can see that. I got this. I don't have these skill sets yet. I need to see what I can try to do about that. And then I'll just look for more books and continue to learn in those aspects. I'll do podcasts as well too, where I listen to other podcasts outside of industry stuff, things that are going to help kind of raise my game, if you will. And I guess the last part is just my circle of influence. I'm trying to get myself around people like yourself and other successful, people that are either entrepreneurs or business leaders that have things that I could try to strive for, and, that's where you create collaboration, you talk, you ask questions, you do all these things, and you start seeing certain trends and certain things that people are doing. And so all of that makes me want to continue to push myself. So as I surround myself with more successful people, I continue to say, you know what, I want to achieve this. I want to achieve this. I want to do that.
So you touched on your like rabid audiobook habit. What's the best book? What book would you recommend to the audience that you've read that's for being better? What's making you strive to be better? The best one you've read, at least, so that we can talk about that a little bit.
Okay.
You got 30 to choose from, right?
I've got a ton, man. Like my phone is loaded with books. They all have a special place in my heart, to be honest. I know it sounds weird, but they all have something special for me. But I would say the one that probably kind of transformed, there's two. I'll say one of them transformed me to reshape my business, and the other one transformed me to go nuts on what I'm committed to doing. The one that kind of helped me reshape my business was this book called Build to Sell. It's essentially where you build your business to sell it, even if you don't plan on ever selling it. And at the time, before I read that book, it was, and this was several years ago, this was probably like 4 or 5 years ago, I think. At the time when I read that book, it was everything kind of ran through me. And then eventually I'm like, you can't scale this. Like if I die, the company's going to die. And so I started kind of like, I use that as a stepping stone to help me kind of figure out the systems I needed to create in the business I was running, to the point where it was just kind of like, it was clockwork, everything. It was great. And that helped me sell the business eventually. But the book that I think that's been probably the most, positive for me is the 10X Rule by Grant Cardone. So have you read that book or no?
It's actually in my queue of audiobooks to read. Funny story. I was in an Uber.
Okay.
And I was going to the Staples Center. I remember that. I don't know what for. Probably like a game of some sort.
Okay.
And started rapping with the Uber driver. And he tells me the same thing. Great book I'm reading right now. Read 10X Rule. And for whatever reason, I just downloaded it. And I was like, okay. I love taking that's like, serendipitous, right? Like, okay, some guy's going to tell me in an Uber driver to read a book. Sure. Why not? So I haven't actually started listening to it yet, because I just finished a book on audio myself. And I kind of do a little different than you. I do one audio, one paperback, and then like switch back and forth, because I don't have the attention span to focus on 2 books at the same time. I'll just get lost in my ADD. So anyway, it's on my list of things to do, but tell me more about it. I'm curious.
Oh man. I've never read a book where my heart rate was going the entire time, like 10X the entire time. And the book really, the way I can kind of sum up the 10X rules, Grant Cardone talks about just 10Xing everything. So 10 times your effort on something. It's like the best example is, if we're going to start a podcast, don't just start a podcast and see what happens. Start the podcast and start publishing a bunch of stuff, going nuts on it, and then start actually, promoting it in every area that you can humanly imagine. Everything. If you're like, same thing with your marriage, don't just be satisfied with your marriage, 10X your marriage, level it up, find ways on how to improve your marriage in all these aspects, cool. If you're, and so he talks about these other things that are interesting. He's like, people talk about always like, Grant, you're everywhere. You're annoying. This is frustrating, yada, yada, yada. And he goes, if you're complaining about me, that means that you're seeing me enough to where I'm getting, I'm basically annoying you, and you know who I am. Like
the peacock rule.
Yeah.
I hate to cut you off on that one, but we got like a couple of seconds left here, and I got to ask this one question.
Okay.
What do you consider yourself to be an expert at, And what's your best advice to our audience as to how to get there? You got so many things to choose from, right? So
right. Yeah, seriously. I would say probably personal branding. And I would say I'm a pretty good expert at that because that's kind of what I do is that's how people find me out on LinkedIn, on Facebook. And I'd say the biggest advice is produce content that's valuable. Don't just put stuff out there that's junk. And then interact with people. Actually have conversations with people. Don't just post something and then don't comment on anybody else's stuff. Interact with people. That's going to eventually create you as an authority in what you're trying to do. And by creating your personal brand, that allows you to not just gain more, authority and influence, but it allows you to become an expert in what you're talking about, and you start learning more about other people as well too.
Javier, that's great advice. I totally agree. I think we align a lot on personal branding and networking. It's all about building relationships, being present, and listening. So
yeah, I agree.
I really appreciate you coming on the show today. I wish that we could go a little longer. We're definitely going to have you back in the near future. There's so much to talk about. Hopefully,
I'd love to.
Yeah, great. And thanks for coming on. And audience, thanks for listening in. Appreciate you guys also tuning in, and we will talk to you next time.
Thank you for tuning in. I hope that today's episode inspired you to become a purpose-driven leader in your career or your community. There is no doubt that when we lead with purpose, we can change lives. If you enjoyed today's show, I'd be grateful if you would take a moment to rate us on your preferred listening platform. To learn more about Branded Group's Be Better experience and how we provide industry-leading, on-demand facility maintenance, construction management, and special project implementation, visit us at www.branded-group.com. Be sure to follow us on social media, and you can also reach out to me directly on LinkedIn. Until next time, be better.